Good evening and welcome to the North Metro Mayors Association Legislative Candidate Forum. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Lori Higgins. I am the moderator for this evening's forum, as well as the president of the Metro North Chamber of Commerce, which is a community partner in the North Metro Mayors Association. The North Metro Mayors Association was created in 1987 as a nonpartisan organization advocating for issues and opportunities of importance to the North suburban region of the Twin Cities. Our goal in sponsoring tonight's Legislative Candidate Forum is to provide residents with an opportunity to learn about the candidates' ideas and positions on issues that we believe are important to the future of our communities in the North Metro region. We will pose 4 prepared questions. Responses will be in rotating order with set time limits on their answers. I note that these limits are maximums and not minimums. We regret that we cannot cover all issues of interest tonight due to time constraints. I am pleased to introduce the candidates with us tonight for House District 35A. We have Josh Youngling and Zach Stevenson. Thank you both for participating in this forum. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes for an introductory statement, and then we will get started with the questions. A coin toss determined that Mr. Youngling would go first. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, my name is Josh Youngling. I'm running for state representative in 35A, which is all of Anoka, Western Coon Rapids. Lifelong resident of this area. I've been here for nearly 40 years. My wife and I have been married for coming up on 28 years, and very vested in this community. We wanted to raise our kids here. We have 3 grown adult children. Well, they're not children anymore, 3 grown adults, and that we thought were important to be raised in this area. And we're very vested in this community, and we think it's important that we continue to try to help this community to get better. The reason I'm running tonight, I have a business background. I've had a business in Anoka for nearly 20 years, a carpet and furniture cleaning company with my father. And I've had a business in St. Paul and Minneapolis as well, Herbert and Gerbert sub shops. So I have a business background. I've been a coach for nearly 20 years in football and baseball. I've been on various boards. So again, this community is very important to me, and the reason I'm running is because I became increasingly frustrated with the direction our state was going, and I felt the need to step up and try to make a difference for Anoka, Coon Rapids, and all of Minnesota. So Josh Youngling, 35A, Anoka, Coon Rapids. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, you have 2 minutes for an introduction.
Well, thank you very much for being the moderator here tonight, Lori, and thank you to the North Metro Mayors Association for having this debate, and for the people who are in the audience and who have tuned in. My name is Zach Stevenson. I am a lifelong resident of the northern suburbs. In fact, I live a mile down the road from the house I grew up in. I didn't get very far in life. My wife is a teacher at Coon Rapids High School, and we have 2 daughters who are 9 and 11. When the legislature is not in session, I work as a prosecutor handling criminal cases. I am the sitting state representative for Anoka and Coon Rapids. I've been in office now for 6 years, and it's been a productive 6 years. I've passed 79 bills in those 6 years. And some of those bills are of issues that are of particular importance to Anoka and Coon Rapids, including creating the Anoka Social District, fixing Highway 10, taking the first steps towards building a new river crossing across the Mississippi between Ramsey and Dayton. Some are much more important from a statewide perspective. You know, cracking down on big pharma, capping insulin at $35 a month, the student borrower's Bill of Rights, and helping folks save money on their energy bills. But I'm running for re-election because there's still a lot more I want to get done. In particular, I want to focus on helping people with the cost of living. We need to get prices down. That's a big issue that I'm hearing about every day when I'm talking to people in Anoka and Coon Rapids. I also really want to focus on mental health, and particularly our kids' mental health, and in particular what's happening with the effect of social media on our kids' mental health, which I think is the biggest issue facing Minnesota that no one is talking about. So I'm looking forward to the great discussion tonight, and thanks everyone.
Thank you. At this time, we will go to our prepared questions. This will be done in a rotating order with a rebuttal opportunity. There is a 2-minute time limit for the answer. After both candidates have answered, there will be a rebuttal opportunity for each candidate with a 45-second time limit. Mr. Youngling, what are the top 1 or 2 issues you hear while campaigning, and if elected, what will you do to ensure that the 2025 legislature works in a collaborative way with the governor and the community to address those issues?
Thank you for that question. The first one I'm hearing of, and this is probably the top one by a large margin, is inflation coupled with historically high taxes. You know, we had an $18 billion surplus. That's on people's minds right now. We've raised our taxes by nearly $10 billion. We've had a 38% growth in our government that I don't think is sustainable, and it's hurting our hardworking families in Minnesota. We need to get back to smart spending. We need to protect our family budgets. And we've had one-party control that was promised to give back the $2,000 rebates for the $18 billion surplus. We were promised substantial permanent property tax relief. That didn't happen. We have not seen middle-class tax relief. And in the next 2 years, the next biennium, we're looking at a $1.5 billion deficit. So smart spending, smart government spending is what I really want to focus on. I think that we need to make sure that we are spending our money wisely, make sure that our money is not going out fraudulently to different programs like Feeding Our Future. The second one I'm hearing about is public safety. Right now we have 1,000 open police officer positions across the state of Minnesota. We have 2,400 police officers up for retirement in the next couple of years. And right now, kids graduating from high school and college are not looking to get into the police department or the police force. They're worried about what will happen to them. I think, and we're seeing police officers that have been 10, 15 years in the force leaving and looking at getting out of it and going into different professions because they're worried about their rights as a police officer. They're worried about their freedom and their lives. So I think those things that are the two big things that I'm focused on and I'm hearing at the door. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and I'm excited to get going and help with that work.
Thank you. I will repeat each question. Mr. Stevenson, what are the top 1 or 2 issues you hear while campaigning? And if elected, what will you do to ensure that the 2025 legislature works in a collaborative way with the governor and the community to address those issues?
Well, far and away, the number one issue I hear when I'm talking to people is about the rising cost of living. And people are really struggling, whether it's the rising cost of health care, the rising cost of prescription drugs, the rising cost of housing. There's a lot of pressure on middle and working class families' budget due to increased costs. And to answer your question about what I would do to address that, I would focus on price gouging. Inflation's happening all over the world. There's a limit to what your state government can do about it, but one thing we can do is pass tough price gouging laws. I actually passed a law against price gouging in an emergency, during an emergency back in 2023. You might recall during the pandemic, people were raising the price of toilet paper and bottled water in those early days of the pandemic, and so we wanted to pass a bill to address that issue. And what I did was I worked collaboratively with the key stakeholders, with the business community, with my colleagues in the legislature, and we arrived at a solution that works for a broad section of the population, and in fact, it passed both the House and Senate with bipartisan support. That's what I aim to do on every issue I tackle. Dig in deep, work with the affected parties, listen more than I talk, and try and get bipartisan support, and that's what I would do if I was reelected.
Thank you. And now an opportunity for a 45-second rebuttal, starting with Mr. Jungling.
Well, I think one of the stories that I wanted to talk about is we had, it's funny, we talk about door knocking. I actually had a young lady come to me door knocking, and they were talking about upcoming votes and what we're going to vote. And I said, what party do you affiliate with? And they're like, well, I'm with the Democrat Party. I said, okay, well, I said, I want to let you know I'm running for state representative. She's like, oh, okay. And I said, but you're here, let's have a conversation. And I asked her, I said, what's important to you? And the story she told me, she's like, what was important to me has changed a little bit. I was out running with my dog. I got attacked. So public safety wasn't a big deal to me until it became real to me. I think it's an abstract thing for most people until it becomes real. And once it becomes real, then it is important. So I think those are things that we need to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, would you like to provide a 45-second rebuttal?
Yeah, I can comment on public safety. That's my profession. I work as a prosecutor when the legislature is not in session. It's something I take incredibly seriously, and I work very closely with the Anoka and Coon Rapids police departments and with the Anoka County Sheriff. We have really excellent police departments in our communities and really strong, great leadership of both those departments and the Sheriff's Office. I feel so lucky to work with those folks because they are some of the best in the entire metro area. One thing that I thought was really important that we accomplished this last year locally was securing additional funding for both the Coon Rapids and Anoka Police Departments. We secured $2 million in new funding from the state for Coon Rapids Police Department and $1 million for the Anoka Police Department. For those departments, that makes a big difference. That's meaningful money for them.
Thank you. Moving to question 2, Mr. Stevenson. Describe your view of local and regional transportation infrastructure needs. Do you believe additional state funding for transportation is necessary? If so, what sources of increased revenue would you consider supporting?
So I think that we've made great progress on transportation needs in the North Metro by working together as collaboratively across party lines and across geographies, building a coalition to address some of the biggest issues we're facing. If you look back to when I first ran for office, Highway 10 was an absolute mess. There were stoplights all the way through Anoka and Ramsey, backlogs every day in the afternoon. Do you know Highway 10 gets more traffic during rush hour than 35W? Can you imagine if there were stoplights on 35W? I mean, it would be havoc. But working collaboratively with Senator Jim Abler and with Senator John Hoffman, we have prioritized Highway 10. Folks in Anoka know the progress that's been made there the last couple years, and in Ramsey, the stoplights are coming out this summer and next summer. And next summer, we're going to add a third lane between Hanson and Round Lake Boulevard. That's phenomenal progress for the North Metro. Looking forward, we need to turn our focus to building a new river crossing between Dayton and Ramsey and relieving some of the pressure that people are experiencing on 169. I passed a bill several years ago to take the first steps on that process, to lay out a plan for how we could address the need for a new river crossing. And I think it's time to move that ball even forward. You know, building a new bridge over the river takes a very long time, obviously, but we got to keep at it year after year after year.
Thank you. Mr. Jungling, describe your view of local and regional transportation infrastructure needs. Do you believe additional state funding for transportation is necessary? If so, what sources of increased revenue would you consider supporting?
I think that's something that both sides can agree on. I think that bridges, we need to have safe bridges. We need to have roads that are not full of potholes. You know, in Minnesota, we have 2 seasons. We have winter and road construction season. So the winters take a pretty heavy toll on our roads. I think that we have enough taxes out there. I think it, you know, for us, for me, it becomes reprioritizing what we're spending on. We need to reprioritize this and make this more of a top line view. You know, again, going back, we had an $18 billion surplus. We've raised $10 billion in new taxes. We grew our government by 38%, and I think there's money within that. You know, the $250 million in fraud. I think a lot of that money has to be spent wisely, and if we spend that money wisely, it can go back into the roads and bridges, and we need to make sure that those roads and bridges are safe for all of Minnesota.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, you have 45 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, I'd just say that, you know, the state of Minnesota is in excellent fiscal shape. We left $3 billion unspent from the last biennium, and the state has a $4 billion budget reserve, which is one reason why every major credit agency in the country gives Minnesota a AAA bond rating. We have great finances, and that extends to our transportation budget, where now we have responsible and sustainable transportation funding set out into the future. So I think that we have the tools we need, and it's time for us to make sure that the North Metro gets their fair share, and that's what I've been working on with some success. You know, when I grew up in this community and always felt like the western suburbs and the southwestern suburbs got all the investment, all the transportation dollars, and we've done a good job bringing that money to the North Metro the last few years, working bipartisanly.
Thank you. Mr. Jungling, would you like to provide a 45-second rebuttal?
Again, you know, just keeping those roads and bridges, the bridges are a top priority. It's all about reprioritizing how we're spending. We are spending historically high numbers. We are not in a sustainable, I know he says we're unsustainable, but we're not sustainable. We're going to see a deficit in the next biennium. And we need to make sure that we continue to spend our money wisely. We need to look at it as a business investment. What is our return on investment? Are we getting that money? Is the money going towards what it needs? Is it making sense? And if it isn't, we need to reprioritize where we're spending it and spending it in the right direction. And I think a lot of that is with our infrastructure.
Thank you. Question 3, Mr. Jungling. This community is part of a global marketplace that competes for business and talent. What policies would you support to help retain and attract businesses and talent to the region?
Well, I think one thing that we are seeing right now, our government is strangling, you know, the DFL control is strangling our local businesses, our Main Street job creators, the people that are out working every single day, putting their life savings at risk sometimes. You know, they're risking it all for the American dream. And I know I was watching this last year's or 2 years ago, preparing for this. North Metro Mayor's Council meeting. And, one of the things that you did bring up was, we need to relax regulations on our businesses. We need to be competitive as a state tax Minnesota. And right now, I think we are number one or number two as the most unfriendly tax state in the nation. We're seeing high regulations going on that are hurting small businesses. Paid family medical leave, I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's sustainable. I think that you have mom and pop shops, Main Street businesses that have 5 to 10 employees and they're going out on paid family medical leave. Now these people have to either hire somebody to continue to help with that for that 12 weeks, or they need to, and like I said, I was a business owner myself. In most cases, you're gonna step up and just kind of try to make it work for the next 12 weeks on your own. And business owners are already being stressed to the limit. And I think we need to make sure that we keep our talent here. If you look to our west, South Dakota and North Dakota are two of the most friendly tax states in the nation right now. So we are in a global market. We have to make sure that we're keeping our talent here.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, this community is part of a global marketplace that competes for business and talent. What policies would you support to help retain and attract businesses and talent to the region?
So you're totally right that we're in a competition across the country and in fact across the world. And so I think the first question you have to ask when you're looking at this is, what are our advantages? What has allowed us to compete quite successfully over the last several decades? I mean, Minnesota punches above its weight economically. We have more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any state in the country. We usually have a lower unemployment rate than the rest of the country, a higher income. And the reason for our economic success is different than other states. It's not because we have oil in the ground. It's certainly not because we have weather that is the envy of the world. It's because of our people. It's because we have a highly educated, highly skilled workforce. And that doesn't just happen. It's something that we have to build every single year by having a phenomenal education system. And so I think the biggest threat to our economic prosperity in Minnesota is the fact that we're kind of been resting on our laurels for education over the last couple decades. There was an article in the Star Tribune today talking about how our test scores have stagnated. That can't continue. Class sizes are rising. My wife is a teacher. Her classes are often 35, 36 kids in a classroom. That's way too big for any kid to get a meaningful education. We need to focus on education because that is what makes Minnesota a great place to live. There's other things we certainly can do. Working on regulations is important, and Josh is right. I probably did say that 2 years ago, that we needed to relax regulation. And that's something that I worked on in the legislature these last 2 years. I sit on the Energy Committee. Minnesota's permitting process for large energy projects was way out of scope with other states, taking months longer. We passed bipartisan permitting reform that will shave 18 months off of the permitting process for large energy projects in Minnesota, which is phenomenal at a time where we need to bring down the cost of people's energy.
Thank you. Mr. Jungling, you have an opportunity for a 45-second rebuttal.
Well, I know you talked about a lot about our education, and I don't agree. I do agree with you on education. The problem I'm seeing is since 2019, we're seeing our reading proficiency down 16%. We're seeing our math scores down 17%. We're seeing our science down 23%. And we've spent historically high numbers on education. So the problem I'm seeing is the DFL control. You've had complete control over the last 2 years. You've had time to shape this into what you want, but we're not seeing the results that we want to see, and we're actually seeing things go down. So yes, I agree that education is, the people of Minnesota are important, but we also need to make sure that they are getting the education they need and they are prepared to move on into the real world right now. And right now, I don't think they are.
Mr. Stevenson, you have 45 seconds.
Well, the success of our education system isn't only about spending. Spending is important, and it's important to note that state spending on education adjusted for inflation is still less today than it was when I graduated from Coon Rapids High School in 2002. And by the way, that is a big part of the reason why people's property taxes are a problem here in the northern suburbs, is the state hasn't been doing its fair share on education spending. But it's also about making some changes to the way we teach, and we've done that in just the last 2 years in the last 2 years, particularly around reading, where we've seen some of those scores go down. We're focusing now on what's called the science of reading, going back to teaching phonics-based reading instruction instead of whole world reading. When I learned to read, it was by using phonics. That's what works. We moved away from it in the last few years, but now we're going to move back towards it, which should definitely help.
All right, thank you. Question 4, we will begin with Mr. Stevenson. Recently, legislation like the Missing Middle Housing Bill has been proposed at the state capitol, which would drastically restrict city zoning authority on certain housing issues while favoring state-mandated regulations. What role do you feel city government should play in determining local housing decisions?
Well, local government has an important role to play across the board. You know, they make decisions that are grounded in the experience of the people in our neighborhoods. So I definitely want local governments to have robust power. But we also have to recognize that we are experiencing a housing crisis here in Minnesota. We're about 100,000 units short of where we should be, and that has a big impact on everybody. It means rents are going up. It means that it's harder for a new family to build a starter home. It's almost impossible these days. I was just talking to some builders earlier this week. It's almost impossible for them to build a starter home in Minnesota anymore. And a big part of that is because we have too many requirements on builders, and some of them, frankly, are just unnecessary. Oftentimes there's aesthetic requirements. You have to use a certain type of brick. You have to have a certain type of window. You have to do this cosmetic thing or that cosmetic thing. And I understand why people want their neighborhoods to look nice. I want my neighborhood to look nice. I want all neighborhoods to look nice. But we need to provide housing for people and give them the chance to buy a house and build wealth and really put a stake in this community. I've been a homeowner in this community for 15 years. I'm so glad I had that opportunity. I want everyone to have that opportunity. And on top of that, here in the northern suburbs, this is a jobs issue because we have so many people in Coon Rapids and Anoka who work in the home construction industry. If we can build more houses, that means more work for our community. So we do need to take a really serious look at how we can relax some of these regulations in order to build more houses. And I want to work cooperatively with local cities and on both sides of the aisle to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Jungling. Recently, legislation like the Missing Middle Housing Bill has been proposed at the state capitol, which would drastically restrict city zoning authority on certain housing issues while favoring state-mandated regulations. What role do you feel city government should play in determining local housing decisions?
I think it's important elected city officials have the ability to make decisions within their city. They are the ones that are in their city every single day. Excuse me. They are the ones that know their city the best. I think a one-size-fits-all program, while it may sound good in theory, is not practical in reality. You know, what the needs in Minneapolis are for and what the needs in Anoka and Coon Rapids are completely different things. So having a complete one-size-fits-all mandate across the state doesn't work. I think you have to rely on the people that are elected to run that city to make those decisions. I think the other thing that we don't talk about and would be an unknowable expense at this point is you have single-family homes. When the cities are planning these things out, they plan developments for single-family homes. They put infrastructure in for single-family homes. If you now allow that to become multifamily dwellings, that's going to put a large strain on the city's infrastructure. And I think that there's going to be a high cost of property taxes, to fix that and to make that a reality. And I just, these are unintended consequences that we don't think about when we're pushing things through and trying to fix things later. And I think we need to make sure that we're putting out laws that make sense, and we got to trust in our city officials.
And now an opportunity for a 45-second rebuttal, starting with Mr. Stevenson.
For me, this question is about how can we build more housing in our community to put people to work and allow people to buy maybe their first home, to get that opportunity to start building wealth and be a part of the community. And I'm really open to discussion with anyone about this issue, to finding a path forward. My preferred way of getting things done is to work together with people to find a compromise that everyone can live with, and I think this is a key area where we can do just that.
Thank you. Mr. Jungling, would you like to provide a 45-second rebuttal?
Well, and you talked a little bit about builders, and I think it's important that we do have a lot of construction workers in our area, and I think it's important. But again, it goes back to, are those building owners or those builders owners able to run a business in Minnesota? And, I don't like going back to this, but I will. I mean, we're putting more and more regulations on our small businesses, and we're pushing them out into other areas. So, yes, I agree that is important, but then we also have to factor in that we need to have regulations and restrictions in place to allow our businesses to flourish in Anoka and Coon Rapids so we can get these things done, so we can build these houses and for everybody. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the end of our questions for this forum. We will now go to the closing statements of our candidates. We are requesting 60 seconds max per candidate, and we'll begin with Mr. Jungling.
Well, thank you for hosting tonight. This is the first time running, so it was very exciting to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to Anoka and Coon Rapids. And really, for me, it comes down to a couple different things. I've been out door knocking. I've been working hard, and I want to understand what the people of Anoka and Coon Rapids want. And I guess the question I have for the people of Anoka and Coon Rapids are: we've had one-party control for the last 2 years, and I want you to ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 2 years ago? And if the answer is no, I hope that you vote for me this coming November, and I would be honored to be your state representative for Anoka and Coon Rapids. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, thank you again for hosting, and thanks, Josh, for coming here tonight. It's great to have a good debate and exchange of views. You know, for me, when I think about this election, I think about a woman I met in Anoka several weeks ago. She was about 60 years old, and she told me she didn't have health insurance. She said she couldn't afford it. She said she had to choose between paying her rent and paying for health insurance, and that she'd rather sleep inside. In Minnesota in 2024, there's no reason for anyone to be making that choice. There's no reason for people to have to be choosing between paying for their pharmaceutical drugs that they need to live and groceries. We can do better. We need to focus on getting rid of this price gouging, go after corporate greed, try to make sure that everyone in Minnesota can afford a great life. Minnesota's been so good to me. I grew up here. It got me a great start in life. I wanted to be here with my kids. It's a good place for my kids. I want it to be that great for the next generation and the one after that. And we need to focus on how do we build a Minnesota that works for everybody generations down the road. That's what my focus will be if I'm reelected.
Thank you. This brings us to the close of this forum. We would like to thank our candidates, the North Metro Mayors Association, and the City of Coon Rapids for making tonight's event possible. Please remember to vote on or before Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Have a great night.